Um, so we're off completely?
No, we're on. It's
Okay.
just, right now
All
we're
right.
getting us streaming live through YouTube, so I'm just waiting for that to finish loading. You can talk.
Yeah, I just.
Hi, this
lost
is
all
Peter
the-
here. I'm in the meeting. I apologize.
Okay. I lost all of you there for a minute, but you can still hear me. So the interaction today will really be primary to the members of the Board of Finance, but we have questions that could be directed towards Board of Ed or Board of Selectmen. So I hope all of you kind of are up to date from our last meeting and things that have been presented to you, things that we have talked about in the past. And you all weighed in with some sentiment as to where things should land in terms of formulating this budget. I would say, though, again, and I reiterate that we have to give consideration to what's happening in our town, our community, our state, and the nation right now. Virtually, the economies have been shut down. Many people are either out of work or furloughed, and that for many, cash flow that they had counted on a weekly basis to take care of household bills, et cetera, just is not being had. So I see Bob Carlson has joined us. Thank you, Bob.
Peter Nero is on too.
Okay, got you, Peter. Thank you.
So just so you guys know, I'm going to turn off all of the cameras for anyone who's not on the committee or one of the people that's going to be answering questions, just so there's less videos on the screen. So if you disappear, you can still hear us. We won't see you.
So just give us a minute
Okay.
when she goes through the matrix here.
So Dan, this is Paul Simons. Can you hear
Just
me
make sure
okay?
that everyone has their mic muted.
Dan, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you heard my question when we first began about seating. I know Ann has listened to all the discussions for many weeks now. So I wanted to make sure that she was seated as a voting member tonight, should we have voting votes.
Yeah, Mustafa, through a lot of the presentations and the debate, you have not been present, where Ann has, she's met all the meetings, listened to all the presentations, and has been active in the debates. So your vote is going to be deferred to Ann if there should be a vote tonight. Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Chairman.
would just like to say that I disagree with that decision personally.
Okay.
Mustafa's been on this board for a lot longer than all of us.
He has
and,
legacy for sure. Mustafa, have you been up to date with the video play on the meetings and data that has been presented, and or had any conversations with Christine as to where we are with the budget preparation?
No, it's not, but I don't think there is anything that says this decision that you've been taken, defer member of Board of Finance because he hasn't been present in meetings.
I can't hear you, Mustafa.
For that.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, if you were talking,
Mustafa.
Mustafa, I could see your lips moving, but I could not hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Mustafa?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
If I might make a point of order here, the decision really isn't, unless you're gonna section 276, Board of Finance, section B, you basically, unless you're gonna disqualify a member from, I'll read it to you, alternate members shall have the duties and powers of regular members and shall be seated if a regular board member is absent.
Meet in this way to try to push something through to meet some sort of deadline that may or may not make a difference simply because you want to stay on some,
We're not trying,
I don't know.
I'm sorry, who's speaking?
Carolyn.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi. So I'm just wondering, is this really necessary to try to push this through? I mean, we have until July, if it's not required to have, public hearings and public meetings and all of this, I would think it would be, easy for us to meet at some point, hopefully not in the far too distant future, but I think it would really, once we've worked through what we're going through right now, we don't know what the next couple of months is gonna bring. It could get really, really bad.
Caroline, may I weigh in, Dan?
Yes, please, go ahead, Mike.
I don't know
Yes.
if you did seen any of my emails. I suggest, I don't suggest, I'm requesting the course of action from our boards is to move
And have discussions
forward
about something.
with the process. That does not mean that we're gonna rush in any way, or maybe we may even prolong it a little bit if necessary. But all we're doing tonight is our regular business. And if a month goes by and we're done and we feel like we might be towards the end of the road with this COVID-19, and we can wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and it makes sense for that to happen, I think we all agree we would rather go through the referendum and town meeting process. That we would like. I absolutely want that to happen. The governor's action, all it does is it allows us, if we need to move business forward, to have that directive to do that. So your concerns are well heard. I think we're doing the work we need to do now. And that's all I've requested. And I was in the middle of explaining, I don't know if you just didn't hear me, but just to vet out that alternate situation, I was trying to just read to you the ordinance, and basically it says, regular members shall be seated if a board member is absent or disqualified. Such a regular
Can't hear you, Mike.
member shall designate an alternate.
It's like shit.
Unless you're gonna say one of your members is disqualified, then there's not really a choice to be made. It's the regular members or the seated members of the board.
So I think, Mike, I thank you for that. I think, and having that at the ready. Early on in this session, when we first started listening to presentations, the board itself agreed that folks need to be present during these presentations to vote on them. So I think Mike and Dan and Ann and everybody else and Mustafa himself, I think, we're all part of that conversation. So I'd love to hear from some of the board members and what they believe we decide early in this process.
Well, Mustafa is talking, speaking. Can you hear me?
Sure
Yeah.
can.
Okay, so I don't agree with that process because we never had that process.
But do you
That's
agree we
not
had the
the problem.
conversation, Mustafa?
Say it again?
Do you agree that you were part of those conversations and we all had a gentleman's agreement that that was going to happen?
No.
You don't?
No.
Okay, interesting.
No, I don't remember.
Well, I can agree that.
So that's number one. Number two, last year budget, I did not participate for the whole, for a while last year. But when I came back and I had to start working on that budget, as if you remember, and I had to make suggestions and correction to the budget. And it seems like nobody mentioned that I'm not supposed to vote at that time.
No, I think last year that's really
Last year and this year.
that we learned something. So we need folks, and again, guys, help me
What
out
do you
here.
mean we learned something?
We learned something that
I
sure, that people need to be present during presentations, part of the debate, part of the conversations, to actually make a solid decision when it comes time to vote. So
Well,
it's,
I've been in the Board of Finance for 10 years,
understand,
and I'm following the budget. And 10 years is not like
No,
short
it's sig-
period
it's-
for
no, it's
understanding
significant.
what's going on. And that's
We
why
keep
last
having
year,
like
as
a
I said,
blackout on what
Yeah, I
we're
don't
hearing, and then it
think,
starts up again.
I don't think you can just,
So
as a
Mustafa
Board
is
of
talking
Finance,
now,
if you're
I'm not
present,
hearing.
you vote. But if you're not, then you can be replaced with somebody else. That's all. This is the rule that we have following this Board of Finance, and I don't know why all of a sudden you want to change that.
I think you were part of the conversation, my friend. I mean, it was all, we talked about this early on, and I was
I don't
fearful
know.
of something like
I
this,
don't remember.
that you wouldn't be part of the conversations, part of the debate, and then come in at the 11th hour. So I am concerned about this.
Mike Anderson, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, first of all, just a point of order for the Zoom process. If you're not talking, hit your mute button because that will cut down on all this feedback.
Thank you, Mike. That's good.
So if you're not talking, put your mute button on, and then that way we're not talking over each other and we can hear each other a lot better. Peter, that means you.
I'm on mute.
I can't see your mute button on, so if it's on, all right. Paul, I remember that conversation well, and that was, it's a point well taken. And it was part of, there was a lot of other things going on, and I just think in this situation with a board member that has been on the Board of Finance for 10 years, is an accountant, who's very, and has been able to, there's a serious feedback from Dan right now.
Yeah, I hear it too. It's,
This is awful. This is a terrible way to meet. Sorry.
Carolyn.
Dan, can you mute yours?
Mike, we lost half of what you said. You start and then it breaks.
Yeah, I was trying to get it through the phone to get a better audio, but that was causing the feedback, so I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you guys mute yours right now?
We are not hearing you as you're speaking.
Can you mute your Zoom button right now? So you're not,
Okay.
you can just, it'll help with the audio. There you go. Is that better? All right. All I'm saying is that I did hear,
Go ahead, say it again.
Mike, why don't you?
we did
say
have
what
that
you were
conversation
saying
last
once
year because there were
again,
several
and see
members that were,
if through clearly and not broken.
okay. I do remember the conversation that Paul is referring to. We had several members that were not attending any meetings. However, I think in this situation with Mustafa's tenure on the Board of Finance of 10 years, his experience in doing budgets, I mean, he basically had the whole Excel spreadsheet that we did budgets with for the last decade until OpenGov. And that there's nothing, I think, in this present budget that necessarily warrants, is anything life altering. So there was a vote. I would say the sitting board meeting member should vote per the ordinance. I understand. We did talk about that, Paul. So I'm not. And I think most of the people were there. I don't know if Mustafa was there or not, but the conversation did happen. I would just say in this situation that we should stick
Okay.
with the board member. No offense to Ann. She's been very diligent, has been done her homework and stuff. So.
Yeah. Mike has read the ordinance. I don't know if you all heard it. So we've heard from Paul Simon. We've heard from Mike Anderson. Dan Smith, do you want to weigh in?
I was present during that meeting, and it seemed like it was pretty clear that the expectation was for everybody to make as many meetings as humanly possible and to engage in the whole process, especially being the freshman board member. And it was pretty clearly stated, you're expected to go and listen and be a part of the process. And if you weren't a part of the process and an alternate was in the place, that alternate should be.
Lost you, Dan.
Because we were the ones getting the feedback on the phone, so I don't.
yeah, I'm hearing Dan very clearly. Mike, are you hearing Dan?
Can everybody?
I hear him. What you might want to do over there at Town Hall potentially is to mute all of your, actually call in on a cell phone. It sounds like you're having some intermittent difficulty.
Mike, we tried that, and that's why there was so much feedback.
There should only be feedback if one of your other devices was not muted.
Right, if you have both going on.
Yeah, if it was one of the computers that had it, one of the YouTubes that had it, that you would have feedback if one of those was not muted. So if you want to take a quick second to take a look at that, it might,
Yeah,
Give us
just
a
give me a
second.
minute.
yeah, just take a minute, take a minute.
Are more than 20 participants.
Okay, so can somebody talk so we can test it to make sure there's no feedback?
I'm talking right now, and you would have heard the feedback even with you talking, so I think you're good.
Yeah, it sounds very clear now.
Okay,
Think we're better?
yeah, we may not see it, but
Oh, I hear, spoke too soon.
there we go. So we may not see them move, but we should hear everything continuously.
Okay, so I may not have a visual on you guys. I don't know if you have a visual of me, but we hope that we can communicate that it's clear at this point.
We see you.
Okay, so as we did hear from Dan Smith, I think he was advocating for members present should have the vote, even if should be an alternate. Is that correct, Dan Smith? Is that what we were hearing?
If, short answer, and should be the one that votes.
Okay. Who haven't we heard from? And Carolyn, what are your thoughts? You're behind me.
I was present for that meeting and I have to agree with Paul and Dan that was the understanding that I had from that. It would be nice for everyone to be able to vote if that's possible. I'm not sure if that's possible or not. I mean, Ian has been participating in all of our meetings. I think she was one of them. And I think that's important. I think they both have a lot to contribute. And she has, I think Mustafa has a lot of knowledge. I don't know, is there a way to have everyone participate and vote if we had to? That being said, I don't think it's necessary to vote tonight. And that's just my opinion.
Okay. So we've looked at the budgets, we've heard the presentations. I don't think we've come to the conclusion whether or not we have a vote tonight. So let's set that aside. I kind of do believe that Ann was present, had heard all the presentations, and should be given consideration. So let's see where the discussion goes.
Just one more thing. I'm sorry, Dan. Does Ann wish to speak on the topic? And
Ann, can you hear me?
If someone's on a phone, you would hit *6 to unmute yourself. And if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Ah, excellent. I was at the meeting and my understanding was that if a regular board member was not present at the meetings where the subject was being discussed, then if an alternate was present at the meetings, the alternate would vote and the board member would not.
Okay. So let's bring it back to the budgets. Let's talk about Board of Ed first, and I appreciate those related to Board of Ed being on with us tonight. They were asking for $674,804 or a 4.9% increase. In my own review of their budget, I stand firmly that things that would be a one-time buy or a one-time expenditure that would not be a carryover in subsequent years probably should come out of the budget and then be considered, if it's critical, to be reviewed through an appropriation. So things that I had looked at were equipment purchases, which was $142,000. Building and grounds, most of that was for rehabilitation of the playground at the elementary school. That was 72,000. I did have a question about utilities, particularly under the circumstance. One that we have, I know we were moving historically to bring up that number, but we have a more efficient building in the middle high school. And the school essentially has been shut down. So there's 43,000 there. And then the other that came to my attention is 119,000 increase in the transportation, and whether or not that was solid by contract, or could be amended, or could be put out over future years as opposed to the current year. So if we were able to develop a deletion of those items I just talked about, it would bring us down from 674,894 to 297,894, or a 2.1% increase. And that essentially is leaving contractual obligations, which is salary, medical benefits, in place. So I think under the circumstances that we are at, that considering a 4.9% increase on the Board of Ed is more than I think we can move on. And I've brought selection ideas relative to their budget as to where savings might be, even though that would be to their discretion. So in looking at those numbers, I brought it down to 297,894, which is a 2.1% increase. So I'd be willing to listen to comments from the Board of Finance on that. Who wants to go first? Mike Anderson? Can you talk, Mike? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
So I guess, how would that special appropriation topic go for things that are necessary here? I guess I just want to know what the procedure is.
It would be one where they would present the situation, the expenditure to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance would disapprove or approve to move it forward to the Board of Selectmen. If it should be in excess of 20,000, if it's less than that, it can be approved by Board of Finance. More than that, it would have to go to Board of Selectmen, who would call a town meeting for a vote on that expenditure.
Okay, I understand that. I'm glad that, I mean, for the people listening, that they would understand that. Would there be a time frame that we would be looking to do that? Should this budget pass? Be something that would be happen this summer?
Yeah.
Or in the fall, or just when they need it?
Yeah, either as they need it or before the school session should start. So, I mean, we could convene during the summer, and we have meeting dates on the calendar to accommodate that. But hopefully it would put us outside of what we're dealing now with COVID-19 epidemic. Christine Wagner wanted to.
That's fine. I'll yield to her.
Okay. Christine, can you hear me? You're welcome to.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand. So instead of letting the town vote on the entire budget that we're proposing, you want them to vote at two different times? Now for a smaller budget, and then we want to go ahead and pay for another referendum for them to vote again. And the only reason I'm a little bit concerned about appropriation is I came to you and the Board of Selectmen for appropriation about 3 months ago for the software program that we had to purchase for our financing because our other software was sunsetting, and I was shut down and told not to move forward with that. And that was just a drop in the bucket compared to what we're talking about for our other needs. So why will we now be able to move to appropriation when we've, I keep hearing, just come to us and ask, but when we do that, we kind of get shut down. So I'm curious about, are we looking at 2 referendums for our budget now? Or I'm just a little unclear of the process, I guess, if you could help me with that. And then to understand how we would be able to move forward to appropriations when in the past, when we're asked, we're just told, no, don't bring that forward.
Okay, so the bigger picture is that the town is under executive orders exempt from public meetings, town meetings, and referendums. So this budget could be developed and approved by the Board of Selectmen and have it go no further. There is no referendum. Then appropriations could be brought forward and brought to a town meeting as we get outside of the current circumstances of the COVID-19 epidemic.
So can I ask a couple questions here? Hello?
Peter.
Yeah, Peter,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So what you're in essence doing is saying this: you're going to take X amount of from our budget, and you're going to pay for it aside, and we're still going to go to the town for the balance. Is that what you're saying? Or you don't have to go even to the town for the balance of that. I'm just trying to get that, grab that in Christine's kind of thinking too.
Yeah, if we were to try to narrow the budget down here with single items could be pulled out of the budget, they could be reconsidered under the appropriation process.
Okay. All right. So getting back again, what this does, which is a good thing, we have some capital expenditures that have been well behind in us taking care of. This would not impact your maintenance of effort going forward. The only thing that would be the balance of that 2 point, I think you said whatever was %. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, what I was trying to get to in particular were one-time items that were put into your budget that, aren't going to be duplicated next year.
Correct.
You then would be working with a forward-moving budget that had single expenditures, which we at this point could pull out to streamline things and bring those expenditures through the appropriation process.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So let's hear from other Board of Finance members relative to what I just talked about. Paul?
So yeah, I do agree that these one-time items should not be part of the normal budget, meaning they have a new Board of Ed or Board of Selectmen would have a new baseline for next year, because it's my understanding that we cannot reduce budgets by anything less than EDC funding reduction. So I do agree that anything that these one-time purchases do not belong in the budget submitted. I'm still very far away from what that number is going to be, but certainly I agree with what you're saying, Dan, is that one-time purchases should not be part of the budget.
Excuse me, Dan, this is Deb Martin. Can I just add something, please?
Yes, I'm with you. Go ahead.
Okay, on the equipment that you mentioned, I'm sorry, the total number was what again?
This might be a rounded up number, 142,000.
142?
Okay, now are you looking at replacement equipment as well?
I would tell you, my budget. This was under placement equipment, which was a total of 141,981. So I'm just using rounded up numbers to make it simpler to catch on.
Okay.
And what was that second value, Mr. Chairman? 142, and what was the other number? I'm just doing the math here.
Yeah, special equipment was 142,000. Building and grounds, the majority of that was for playground rehab, 72,000. There was a utility increase configured in there of 43,000, and a transportation increase on whatever that transportation contract is of a one-time of 119,000. So if I total all of those, it brings us down from 674, 894 as an increase presented to us to 297,894. So it's suggesting that contractual relative to staffing is less intact. And
So are you also, sorry, Dan, are you also including the additional 60,000 we have to contribute for EDC reduction? Or is that an add on to that?
I didn't put that in there, so this was kind of first swipe
Yep,
to
gotcha. That's a good one.
trying to make some rationale as to how could we work with this and bring the budget number down.
Okay.
Let's hear from another Board of Finance member that hasn't spoken yet. I heard from Dan, Paul, and Mike. Carolyn, you're behind me. What do you think?
I was just curious, I mean, I just have some questions actually to Peter Nero. I didn't hear back.
You're gonna have to talk a little louder because you're that far away.
Peter, did you get my email that I sent you? I mean, I'm just curious. I sent you an email about the computers that the state's been giving away. I mean, I know it's not necessarily related to this budget, but since we are in the situation that we're
Carolyn, I did. One of the things that you need to understand is that when we walked out of the first budget meeting, I said we'd be willing to answer any questions that if it went to the chair and then went to us. Okay, so we go from your chair to our chair. So I sent that answer to Dan 2 days ago, because I responded the same day I get the questions. The fact of the matter is, most of those computers were going to the inner city or urban schools. The fact that we had to react quickly on this, we employed our own, although they're 5 and 6 years old, we employed our own computers to get the hardware done and the software done, to get everything into the kids' hands, sanitized and everything that both and Gabe worked on, to get it so that we could hit the mark running. So that was my answer to that question. But most of those computers, the same thing that's going on in, state that I live in, where I work, Rhode Island, anything that was available was going basically to urban districts or inner city schools.
So do all of our students have computers? I'm just asking, as
I'm sorry, you're going to have to speak up. I can't hear you.
I'm just wondering do all of our students have computers to use right now at home, or are they just?
Yes, they do. Again, our staff has been working pretty much through the weekends to get everything done. We're also helping out families that have multiple children in their home. I have parents that are not only taking care of 3 and 4 children in their homes, but they are working from home themselves, and using their own personal computers to do that. So we feel as though we are very, very good right now. The problem that's going to be is the equipment that we have is 5 and 6 years old, and we don't know the condition it's going to be when it comes back because it is so old.
So my other question regarding the computers would be, if you purchase new computers so that they would be available for either use in your physical building, or if the student was to take them home?
No, we have not. And if you recall in the budget presentation that we did, we showed you I'm going to, just basically say, the age of all our computers. We did not purchase any computers as a result of the pandemic. We really can't afford to do that.
That's not my question. My question is, going forward, if you were to purchase computers for the students to use, whether it be in your facilities or if they had to use them at home, if this type of scenario was to continue, do those computers, what is their life? What is, how long do you anticipate those usable?
Well, again, in the board's hand right now, and looking for, in fact, we're meeting on this tomorrow, we really need a one-to-one program. And again, as you've seen our budgets where our technology is, the board has, been thinking pretty hard about doing a one-to-one program. But we cannot afford to do it, as you can see where we are right now with the budget right now. But, you know, again, getting back to what Dan is doing, if you're looking for a one-time capital expenditure, this might be another area for the future for us to look at, for the Board of Finance, for all of us to look at, because we could probably help out, and you could probably help out in that scenario. But again, we're looking at, some of the one-to-one programs at a minimum are going to be between 95 to 100,000 as a startup. And every year when we get to that point where we're dealing with, essentially stuff that we can't afford to purchase because we have other important things to buy.
So now that we're in the situation that we are right now, is the school seeing any cost savings in any area due to the fact that we're not busing children to the schools and teaching them?
Just let me say this, because Deb can chime in at any time that she wants. We don't know what our savings are going to be. Based on the federal stimulus in the CARES Act, and based on what the governor, in terms of his latest order 7R, which came out yesterday, we have to continue to pay our employees, and including some expenses for transportation, by the law. So we are going to continue to pay as we should be paying, and we're still trying to figure out, there's still some discussion about, by law, we have to pay the bus company for the salary and benefits, salary and health care for their employees. And there's also the kicker that was in there, including some fleet expenses, which I had a conversation with my attorney at 5:15, 5:20, and a conversation with Deb around the same time, which is we're not sure. Remember, if we were to violate any of this, any stimulus money that would be going forward to anywhere, we would be violating even to the town. So we're trying to follow that. So I can't tell you exactly how much money we're going to save because there's still a lot of balls up in the air.
Okay.
So coming back to the main discussion in terms of trimming it down, I was giving consideration to staffing for programming relative to the School of Choice initiative. And that I think we've heard a couple of presentations. There seemed to be very positive progress relative to that from not just one, but multiple accounts. And it does seem to me to be a way for us to bring in some added revenue. But as Christine made the case, for us to cut staffing, it compromises programming, that compromises that initiative. So does anybody else want to weigh in to that thought? Mike Anderson? Your thoughts on that?
I think that's obviously the way I'd want to go. We have to preserve the money where it matters to maintain those promises that we made for the School of Choice. There's no question about it. And I guess to the last point, if there are savings, I think that needs to be, that are going to be given back to the town. That has to be very much part of the conversation about appropriations going forward. If there is significant monies that, I don't think we necessarily need to increase the reserve fund right now, that money should definitely be earmarked, or at least let the town people know if there's a vote on subsequent appropriations that there was money given back to the town from any savings from this year. I'm all done.
Okay, I agree with that. As Peter said, it's hard for him to, and Deb Martin, to totally define or articulate what the savings will be. I think at this point, I don't know if the decision has been made. Christine Wagner may know this, whether it's just anticipated that the entire school year will be continued as it is. I mean, there's no forethought that kids would come back before the close of the school's session. Is that true?
Yeah, we don't know at this point. Right now, we're looking at, the last date we were given was April 20th. Obviously, in light of what's going on with the federal message, I would think it's April 30th. We're just taking it. I mean, we've been in triage for the last 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So we're just taking it every 2 weeks at this point. So we don't know the status of resuming or not resuming at this point.
Okay. Paul, would you weigh in on what we're discussing relative to trying to maintain staffing for the sake of the integrity of programming?
Sorry, I think that question was to me, Dan. I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing you.
You want me to re-ask the question?
Yeah.
Just your thought of trying to maintain staffing in order to also maintain the integrity of programming to
Right,
help the
yeah.
initiative school of choice.
No, I understand. So I think, the school of choice, it's a fine goal. I think the world has changed with the crisis that we're in now. My fear is funding for such a lofty goal when I'm sure many residents will be unemployed here in the near future because of the fears of this COVID crisis. I think we have to tread carefully. So it might mean this year that budgets are not increased by 2, 3, 4%. They're held very low. Again, I'm thinking of the residents that are very likely to be unemployed, not able to pay the tax bill for a goal like this, which I think it's a wonderful thing, but I don't think it belongs with us this year.
Okay, Dan Smith?
I have the same sentiments as Paul Simons.
Okay, Mustafa?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we need to go forward with that project because, I mean, being in this situation like COVID-19, without that material, our kids will not be getting anything from school. So this is what we need to think about. We have to think like forward, like long term. So we need those, the material for school, and I think we need to go forward for that.
Okay. Ann Aiken?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, well, I did a 5 and a 10-year analysis looking at just the non-negotiable, non-arbitrary costs that the Board of Education has to cover. And those costs alone are over 0.25 mils a year, increasing year upon year upon year. And even looking at the income from students coming in from out of district, it's not even coming close in most cases to covering just those cost increases, not to mention anything else that has to be added in, such as books, computers, supplies. So I think we really need to sit back and rethink this. And especially this year, when we are in the situation with so many people out of work, I don't think this is a sustainable model, and I certainly don't think it's something we should be trying for this year.
Okay, thank you. Hal?
I had said before at our last meeting when we all met in person that if we were going to the school of choice, realizing that this would be the year that they, would need to start it to get it going, that, I would not be opposed to a one-time, payment from our rainy day fund, if you want to call it that, just to meet that need, but not to increase the mill rate for that reason. But again, I think there's a lot to talk about. To Ann's point, you know, if you're looking at the costs that are not negotiable year over year. And I have to say, you know, I was very disappointed at our last meeting to hear Paul say that when he went to the negotiations, that they really weren't negotiations. Because in my mind, I thought that when these contracts were being renegotiated, that actually, you know, there were things that could maybe, you know, bend a little bit, but it didn't seem to be that way. So I've said it before that I think that things are very tight for a lot of people. What we're dealing with right now in regards to basically, you know, just about everybody, except for emergency services and medical practices and other businesses like restaurants and things and grocery stores that are, you know, supporting us every single day. A lot of people are working from home or they're laid off and they're not even going to get any unemployment for many, many weeks. So, I mean, that's the reality, is that a lot of people are not getting a paycheck right now. And to say that they would be supportive of this type of increase, I just don't think it's going to fly. I just don't, as much as, you know, I'm supportive of the school and I would love to, you know, have this program go forward, but it does need to be sustainable and it needs to have the full support of the public. And I think that, you know, things are already tough and I think it's going to get tougher. And I don't know that we're even going to have the answers by the end of this fiscal year. So, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I don't know, you know, I might be mistaken, but, you know, that's what I see and that's what I hear all around me every single day. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not opposed to necessarily a one-time thing if that's what was needed to, you know, make it happen. But again, if it's not sustainable, I think we always have to take care of our children in town first. That has to be our priority. That's why we have our schools in town, to serve our children first. And then, you know, of course, if we can take care of other children and grow our programs, I think that's wonderful as well. That's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, so we're kind of split on that issue.
Christine has her hands up. I don't know if you want to talk to her.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christine, I didn't see your hand go up. Go ahead, Christine Wagner.
I just wanted to be clear, when we were talking about bringing students in from other schools, we weren't growing our programs with that money. We weren't adding programs. We weren't changing anything that we currently have to bring those students in. So there would be nothing we would be cutting from that presentation if we didn't, if other schools don't send their kids here, our programs stay as they are. Just to be clear on that, we're not adding anything to entice other children to come here or other students to come here. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Hey, this is Peter. Can I weigh in as well?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so a couple things. First of all, I got a phone call from the superintendent on Monday who are, you know, we are in negotiations for their kids to come to school here. And I had to refer him to the high school because where they are sending their kids to high school right now, they are not doing any distance learning. So for the last 2.5 weeks where they send their kids to, they're not getting any distance learning. That's number one. The second thing is, in these hard economic times, are we going to turn our back on the possibility of let's put it this way, we gave you some conservative figures, 5 students a year, but if we were to max out, in the absence of, now, even if you're telling me the economy is going to be tough, which it's going to be, in the absence of economic development, we are offering you close to $600,000, which it could be full force in 4 years revenue to the town. I'm going to say, let's say the average household is $6,000 a year in taxes. We'll make it $5,000. That's the equivalent of 12 houses paying taxes in North Stonington, number one, without delivering any services. And by the way, the busing is going to be at no cost because we're doing depot stops. So while I hear why you're saying, I completely get it, but I'm saying to you guys, you know, in the absence of any type of additional revenue coming into the town, which may even be tougher now, we're offering you that.
Thank you, Peter. You know, I think that argument has been well heard. I also will make note that the outcomes that we've had to date, besides having new facilities, you know, our students are coming to the cream of the crop and I think that is drawing attention to those families who are looking to relocate. And this epidemic that we're in, I hate to use this term, but it is a transitory event, but we don't know the length of the continuum. You know, when is it all going to be over? So certainly there are a lot of models, but the things that we're talking about now are going to be, again, received in that environment, but are looking forward to a fiscal year where we hopefully are outside of this transitory event.
Mike Anderson has something too.
Mike, go ahead. Mike Anderson?
You're muted, Mike.
You're muted, Mike.
Thank you. I think to Christine's point that, I mean, these are programs that we already have that are, and to Dan's point where these are the programs that are causing our schools to be schools of distinction and drawing people and likewise, hopefully businesses to this community because they want to be where people want to be. And to Ann Aiken's point, thank you, Ann, for doing that analysis. You know, I think the point is that if the programs and the staffing, all the costs are going to happen over the next 10 years. And why wouldn't we want to do everything we can to bring in revenue to offset that at least as much as possible? You know, otherwise you just have costs. You know, to Dan's point about we're not just a board that is going to be focused on expenses. We're focused on building revenue and building our revenue stream. And that's what this Board of Selectmen are doing. That's what the Economic Development Committee is doing. You know, we're trying to stop focusing so much on cost and cutting when we need to be working on what are the things that are helping us grow. So those expenses are there no matter what, and this is revenue that we can't afford to lose.
Yeah.
Deb has something she'd like to add as well.
Deb Martin.
Yes, Dan, just back to your numbers before any decisions or votes are going. In that 141 for equipment, there's also 34,000 that goes toward network supplies and that kind of thing. So I wanted you to keep that in mind if you could. And then on the utilities, it's not so much an increase or an added amount, but what we did was we looked at what the actual expense is at the high school with all of the new equipment, all of the, you know, the climate control with everything and what it's been costing us over the past year, took that square footage and estimated what the elementary school was going to be. That 43,000 is because the costs that it is right now to run the high school estimated going forward per square footage for the elementary. So that's not built in as a arbitrary number. That was actually built in as what the expected costs will be based on what we're currently paying. However, there's no solar anticipated savings in there either. I just wanted to put that out for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I wasn't necessarily being arbitrary in terms of pulling that out. You know, my thought was, okay, we try to build in energy efficiency with school. Again, I've been on the school modernization project as well as Mike Anderson. And so a lot was done with the intent that we have savings in utility use. So it's just a figure I'm looking at, you know, in terms of whatever is decided is going to be to the discretion of the Board of Ed and the district. But it was just a number I came to. So if we were to consider those numbers I brought forward, which would be bringing it down to 297,894, that's roughly a 2% increase to the budget, and that would translate to a 0.56 mil increase. But we just want you to keep that in mind. And that discussion, I want to leave right now. I want to bring in general government, and then I hope to kind of fit both the pieces together with some overall thought as to where we need to be. So on the general government side, I know that Board of Selectmen had gone back yet again for another iteration and have a proposed an increase of 188,934, which would be a 2.9% increase to their budget. Now, do recall, a good piece of that is the debt obligation that is contractual for school project, which was roughly 132,000.
139.
139, excuse me, 139. So that 139 is in that 188,934. So I see no way around the 139, but that's something that we are contractually obligated to. And then mill rate increases have been talked about profusely to the public relative to that project. And yet we still are under what we had projected mill rate increases to be in order to satisfy the completion of the reality of those two new facilities. So if that were left alone, let's just take it there, left alone at 188,934, that's a 2.9% increase to their budget, which translates to 0.35 mil. So if we are working with what we now have reviewed, it would be a total of 0.91 mil increase. So it would be under 30. I'm sympathetic to the conditions that we are in and the work condition that most people now are in, that, you know, they perhaps have been furloughed, they're part-time, they are out of jobs, and unemployment is yet to hit the books for them. So if we were to, that would translate to a total, let me just take it further, a total budget of $20,763,400, which to the public would be a 2.4% increase. That would be satisfied by a 0.91 mil being set. And I think relative to the conditions, I think we need to do better than that. So here's my thought. The two increases proposed, the number I came to on Board of the ask on general government, is a total of $486,828. If we could develop a savings to that of 100,000, and it could be split 65,000 more in savings on Board of Ed, 35,000 more in savings on general government, it would put us at a budget increase of 385,255, which would be a mil increase of 0.73, for a total budget increase of 1.9. I then would propose, because
Dan, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm sorry, but I missed that last part when you said the Board of Ed, then you said on the town site. Can you repeat those numbers again? I apologize.
Yeah. So the combined numbers between the proposed on Board of Ed of 297,894 and the ask or proposed from general government of 188,934,000 comes to 486,828. That would put us at a 0.91 mil increase would represent a 2.4% increase to the total budget. If on the 406,828 total, if we can par that down to 385,255, or roughly 100,000 off that number, maybe a continued savings of 65,000 from Board of Ed, 35,000 from general government. That would put us at a budget increase of 1.9% or 0.73 mil. I also then, which is almost hard for me to say, but I take it in consideration to the environment we are in, that 385,000 could be accommodated by a revenue income from our unassigned, with the thought that there's give back from Board of Ed and potentially revenue from out of district students coming into the school, which means that the mill rate could stay status quo. And we kind of give everybody what they might need in a critical view.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, let me get Christine Wagner first, and I'll come to you. Christine Wagner.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly. So you would be taking out of the general fund, but then you would be funding it with Board of Ed money that would come in later in the form of using the tuition money and any give back money. So basically the Board of Ed would be funding this increase.
Not necessarily, but I see that if we were to take the 385 from the unassigned, that there would be some backfill, even though we still would give consideration to appropriations on the items that needed to come out of the Board of Ed budget. So as my Board of Finance members will tell you, I just see the unassigned always as our sacred cow. Some will call it a rainy day fund. I think we're kind of in a rainy day, but it's transitory. I don't think it's something that we're going to have to worry about 3 months from now as we get into the new fiscal year. So I have to take consideration as to how our decisions are going to be received, but yet give consideration to moving as best we can everything forward to the future, to the next fiscal year. So those are just thoughts, so that's not in stone, but we have to get to a point where we're starting to shape this a little bit. So at this juncture, I would ask for some comments. So Dan Smith, why don't I come to you first? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Carolyn, you had something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the point, especially because we're in our situation now. We've talked a lot about public safety, and like I said, always it should come first. Has there been any consideration at all to adding back in at least one of the paid firefighters to get that going?
That question would go to you, Mike Urgo.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So, I mean, from the very beginning, I've said this kind of over and over in the presentations, and it's not that I'm not, nor is the Board of Selectmen not in favor of the fact that we want to see our our staffing levels up. Really, we'd like to see our volunteer levels up, but we're doing everything we can. I know the fire company is as well. But we formed this committee, and that committee is slated to meet this week to look at what the potential solutions are there, and we really want to capture some data and really kind of look outside the box and look at all alternatives to see if the right course of action is there. So to answer your question, no, there was no appetite for adding that back in. I think our directive at the very beginning was to try to collect some data, get a group together, look at what some options are, and we'll kind of move forward after we have some data, because it's really important, because I think we're very sensitive to, what is the public going to, what are they going to be able to, what's going to be palatable. And I think things are much more palatable when we have a lot of data to back up our decisions. So that's where we're at.
Mike, we some receptivity to the library. So relative to your ask, what was left for the library?
Yes, we did, let's see here.
Mike, do you want me to answer?
Go ahead. I'm pulling it up on my, go ahead, Christine.
Okay, so the library is funded at 55,000 in this budget, which is a $25,000 increase from the current year, but it's not what they requested to be funded, not as high as they requested to be funded.
Okay, thank you.
And we went back to the drawing. Even though you didn't really give a directive on it, we went back and we did cut a little bit more, you know, as best as we could figure out, with a budget that was pretty light, to begin with, considering the last couple of years, we really haven't had increases either. In fact, we had a decrease last year. So, you know, what you've got there is a pretty bare bones, except the debt, of course, which you guys had already talked about.
Right. I think the other thing that kept coming up, I don't know that we discussed it in our Board of Finance meetings, was treatment of the lakes, which I think was a $17,000 ask. Where did that land?
We did not.
No, we didn't fund that back in. However, you know, we met the last time we met was the 18th, which was after your last meeting. I would say subsequently, I've gotten quite a lot of feedback on that, the removal of that line, $15,000 line. So we at this point, what you have before you does not include 15,000 for the lakes treatment.
Any other comments relative to general government that may be under Mike? Yes, Mike Anderson. Go ahead, Mike.
I just want to confirm that, I mean, I went over the one that Christine put out. Correct me if I'm wrong, was that you had $6,815 in reductions from your most recent look through?
Yes, that's correct. The specific number is 6,815.
Right, that's what I got. Dan, what was your ask? You wanted them to cut how much more?
If the total between, you know, what we're discussing here was 486,828, which would represent a 0.91 mil increase. My own thought, considering paring that down 100,000, to come in at roughly at 386,000, would represent 0.73 mil, or a 1.9% increase to the total budget. And then whether or not that should be accommodated by an income source out of the unassigned to keep the mill rate as it is currently.
And what was the number from the unassigned you're proposing, Dan, again? I'm sorry.
Roughly 386,000.
Or 10% of the unassigned, round numbers, a little bit more?
Well, yeah, the 10%.
A little bit.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, right now we have about 3.1 million in the unassigned.
Yeah,
So-
I thought there was 2, but we're close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a little bit over 3, or 10% rather.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard from you of late. What's your thought on things we're talking about? Ann Aiken?
Oh, yes, Dan?
Yes.
If I understood correctly, 74,000 of what you were proposing to cut from the Board of Ed budget cannot be cut. So it's It's more like 450,000 unless they find another 74,000 to cut somewhere.
Okay.
Because they said the 43,000 for utilities can't be cut. And 31,000 of the equipment budget cannot be cut.
Yeah.
Was I understanding that correctly, Deb?
Yes, but I pull those out, not totally arbitrarily, but as points of discussion. But whatever number we come down to, it would be left to the discretion of the Board of Ed to where those numbers should fall and where they should come from.
Okay, I understand. If we can get the increase down to what you are proposing, I would agree with a 0.73 mil increase. And I would agree with taking it out of the rainy day fund for a one-time only deal.
Yeah, thank you, Ann. Again, my sense there is, I think people right now are just overwhelmed by all the negative news. Whether it's the spread of the virus, whether it's somebody they know who's been infected, fighting the disease. I think the death numbers really hit home, particularly, with some people who, by all observation, would be healthy individuals, all of a sudden are in critical condition leading to death. I think that we would be being responsible to take into consideration the circumstances that we are now living in. I still think it's a transitory event, but we're not out of it yet. And people are still in many ways dealing with the pain.
Mike Anderson has something.
Who had it? Mike Anderson. Mike?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
All right, I just want to clarify, I guess I'm a little confused. To even get down to the 2.4% number,
Yeah.
the Board of Ed would have to lose 376,000 or something like that?
Right. You would go from 674, 894 to 297, 894. And those were just numbers.
Right, so.
That could be talked about, in particular, the one-time expenditures.
Sure.
That made up most of it, right? The one-time expenditures?
Yes.
Right, so, and then.
Still leave discretion of the Board of Ed, and if it meant coming back with the one-time expenditures through the appropriation pathway, that's open.
I understand that, so wouldn't those one-time appropriations be out of the reserve fund?
They would be.
Okay, so are you proposing that we reduce, if they could come up with another $100,000 worth of cuts between the two of them to bring it down to 0.73, are you proposing we use the reserve fund to fill that gap for another 376,000?
Yeah, not knowing what the appropriations would be, in terms of whatever their discretion is on the Board of Ed side, that yes, we would consider it coming out of the unassigned, but it would go to a town meeting.
Okay, so there's a potential of 700 and something thousand dollars coming out of the reserve. Is that correct?
Potentially, but again, it's a matter of what is brought forward for appropriation and what is approved through a town meeting.
Okay,
And
I
then
just want to make sure that I'm understanding that, because there's two
Right.
sets of areas where we're looking here. We're looking to say, all right, Board of Ed, you don't get this money, but we're going to do an appropriation potentially later on, given whatever circumstances are really there at the time, how much money, carried over and what you actually need.
And what
then-
givebacks come, and what revenue comes in from school of choice initiative.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So I
Right.
think those two pieces could nearly offset this proposed item unassigned.
Okay, I
Now,
just want to
the
make
other-
sure I want to be sure I was clear that when you're talking about, taking this 0.73 and knocking it down to 0, that there's still a potential for further use of the reserve undesignated fund later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I only bring this forward, I'm right with you, Mustafa, only because, I myself and some of the legacy board of finance members, President Mustafa, we've worked very hard to build that unassigned fund to where it is, and it's worked for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's, yeah, I
Have it.
understand that. It's not a decision that any of us take lightly.
No, but I do see this as a rainy day. Now, you would have to, if we were to keep the initiative going on the school, I think general government has done a really good job of paring things down that would give consideration to the taxpayers, the residents of our town, by taking from the rainy day fund at this point. The compromise to that would be having a modest mill rate increase. So it doesn't have to be a 0.73. It could be a 0.3. It could be a 0.5. So again, that's open for discussion. Mustafa, you had a comment?
Thank you, Dan. So, as all of you know that I've been in this sport long enough to go through like few crises. This is not the first one, and we've never get to the point when we had to use reserve funds. As you know, Dan, I'm always against using reserve fund for kind of budgets, just regular stuff, something that can be covered by our budget, unless we have like I don't know, like a huge problem that we need to get that money from the unassigned fund. So to me, this crisis will be the same as the one that passed before, and we have to find a way to get this budget going without thinking of the unassigned fund. And we have like, the total is like 297, is that what it is? Like, we're looking for 297, 894?
It was 297, 894
Right.
for that, which would be roughly a 2% increase.
So to me, 2% increase, I mean, I don't want to see an increase in our budget, at least less than 1%, but we have to find a way without thinking, putting like the assigned, the reserve fund as priority to use for this kind of issue. And we don't have to hammer the Board of Ed because of that. I mean, we've been working on this, on this town to keep this town going forward. We were looking to get students from other places. We never thought about it like a few years ago that we will have people coming to our school to be educated. We get to that point. So when we get to that point, we cannot back up and start thinking, oh, there's a COVID-19, we got an issue, we got a problem, stop everything. We can't think that way. We're going forward, we need to keep going forward, and school is priority for our town to keep us going forward. Thank you.
Carolyn, I haven't asked you yet. about using the unassigned?
I just said before that, we were opposed to using it just once, if, it meant to, keep this program in place, like what Ann had alluded to. But again, to Ms. Dalvin's point, it's not ideal, but this is where we're at. I really don't think, the school's telling us they can't do a 0 increase. I think if you put this forward to the public, it would not fly. As much as people love the school and, just everything, I think people are at a point right now where they just aren't gonna have the funds available to, support it. I think that's unfortunately the reality of where a lot of people are at now. Maybe not everyone who's included in our discussion right now, but these people that every day, people that aren't working and aren't getting a paycheck right now, probably having to think about paying COBRA payments on top of deferring their mortgages for 3 months or whatever is available. That's the reality of where a lot of people are at right now. And I think that we all need to take that into consideration. And when you say that you're gonna put public safety on the back burner, I don't know. I just, I respect wanting to gather information, but I also know what the reality is that we're dealing with. And, we have a big mess right now. I think there's a lot to think about and a lot to discuss and consider.
Except with that last comment, we still have to move forward and develop some decisions. Who haven't I heard from?
Dan Smith.
Dan, Dan, I asked you about the unassigned, did I not? Dan Smith?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
So Dan, this is Paul.
Go ahead.
Again, this unassigned fund or our rating day fund, it is indeed raining. And Mustafa, I think this COVID-19 event you're seeing is not like anything you've seen before, or any of us had in our lifetime. But using the unassigned fund, I do have concerns. Isn't this akin to deobligated funds? Whereas next year, now we have to find another $350,000 just to make things even, or is this coming from a different pathway?
My thought, and it's on a hypothetical model, Paul, is if we were to use the $386,000 out of unassigned, that some of that is going to be refurbished by givebacks from the Board of Ed this year because of their circumstance, even though they can't define it as yet. And that they also have been very positive about the potential of bringing in students from outside the district, which comes directly to the general fund. It doesn't go to the Board of Ed, it comes back to the general fund.
Right. So
that's 386. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch to think that maybe there's 150 or 200,000 that comes back to us.
right. But are we adding to the bottom line budget increase? So is the budget increase for Board of Ed still going to be some, whatever that number is, $600,000, because we've taken $300 and some odd $1,000 from the unassigned?
No.
No.
Yeah, the number still would be 297,894 minus a proposed 65,000 of us trying to pare it down. So that would come in at 232,894. So no, and whatever would come in later in terms of appropriations would be considered on a one-by-one basis, whether it's purchase equipment, whether it's playground rehabilitation, whatever it might be.
So the monies we would take from the unassigned fund to give us a mill rate increase of 0 wouldn't
Correct.
go directly to the Board of Ed's bottom line budget. It would be more general in nature.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Not anything that adds to the Board of Ed budget.
Okay, because I would be concerned if that was to raise the new baseline that we'd have to find funding for next year.
No, it would not. No. Christine
Okay.
Wagner, you had your.
Thank you. I'm a little confused, so just bear with me. First of all, it sounds like we aren't even going to wait to see if there's an option for a referendum here. So you'll need to answer that first. I really think, I realize the governor gave an executive order, but we have some time. And if we can at all let the taxpayer weigh in, that is the best alternative. We have taxpayers that have an option to vote, and I don't think we should rule that out yet.
Christine, if I could just interject, we are absolutely going to have a public hearing on this, and we're going to go like we normally would, hoping that we will get to a referendum. So yes, the public will, once the Board of Finance does its normal action of approving a budget, it will go to public hearing, even though it may be a virtual public hearing.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question is, so cutting the Board of Ed budget down to the 297,894, you're saying that's not a budget increase for us? That's just a side give me, or I'm not really understanding that. So I would assume that if you're cutting our increased request down to whatever that equates to in a percentage, that would go into our bottom line budget. And then secondly, if that's coming out of the rainy day fund, if we go for appropriation, that's also going to come from the rainy day fund. So that would be doubling what's coming out of that. And then I guess what I'm hearing is we only get the option to go to appropriation if we have savings this year and give it back. I'm not comfortable with that, to be clear. If our budget gets cut to where you need to cut it to, and we will do whatever you tell us to do, but short of laying off programming and teachers, which is what will have to happen, and I understand that, if we have savings, we're going to look to what those capital expenditures are for next year, and we're going to try to get ahead of that, not hope on a wing and a prayer that we give it back to the town and they give it back. It's not, I don't mean to sound so confused, but it's not making a whole lot of sense to me. And I guess maybe I need some more clarity, or maybe we can get it in writing what that plan would be, because I'm just not clear.
Okay, you got to listen to what I'm going to tell you, Christine. We're taking your proposed budget increase of $674,894, bringing it down to an increase of $297,894. Where those cuts come are to your discretion. Okay?
Okay, I understand that, but I thought I just heard Paul say that they're not increasing our budget, so that's where I was a little confused.
I gotta say, I'm really confused. How much money are you asking us to cut out of our budget between the way the money is flowing and moving from the unassigned fund? How much money are you asking the Board of Ed to cut from their budget?
This was the cut I came up with, that again was looking at line items that could be put into question, but it would be to your discretion. That total dollar amount is $376,000.
There's no way we can cut that kind of money out without devastating the school department. There's just no way we could do that.
It's going to have to be staffing.
And that would
It's gonna
also
be-
be before the 65 that you're also asking in addition.
Right. So just put it this way. Here's what hampers the whole deal, what's hampering the whole deal with the out-of-district students. I'm afraid to say anything because what they may be looking at is a devastating system. So we have a catch-22 here. There's no way we can cut $375,000 out of the budget. Now, I'm intent to agree with Christine on the fact that what is our hurry? Because right now I'm looking at the CARES Act and still trying to figure out, maybe I'm going to have some money, some savings at the end of the year because of transportation based on what we're seeing right now. I mean, there's no way we can cut $375,000 out of the budget. No way.
If I could weigh in on the, what is the hurry question? There's not a hurry, but it's important that we stay on target with our process, because without revenue coming in the form of us setting a bill rate and going through our process, we won't have money to pay anyone. So it's important that we continue our process in an on-time, timely fashion in order to make rent, basically, for everything. So we're not rushing anything by any means. I mean, we're in the all we've done now the last 2 weeks. We took off basically, which was a good idea, and now we're just picking up where we left off and just moving at a normal process pace. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
May I ask one more question and then I'll stop interjecting? I apologize. If we have savings this year, is there any, I know nobody is really a big fan of the ERISA account, but is there any way to flag that money for Board of Ed spending next year? And let that money carry over, knowing it was approved Board of Ed money in an approved budget for this year, and carry it over next year and flag it for spending for the Board of Ed without it having to be an appropriations. Can it be put into a separate fund for a 1 year only because of the situation? Something that we can do maybe outside of the box here a little bit with that, so that we're not doing a pre-buy or a pre-spending type of situation like we've been in the past.
Dan,
in terms of,
can I comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike, and then I'll add to it. Go ahead.
No, I know, we had talked about this, and I know me and you and Christine had talked about it, and I think I had mentioned to Christine, I think, and Peter, that the town attorney, it is something that's done in other places, and that he recommended that if there's a proposal like what you just described, if you would come to probably the Board of Finance with that proposal, maybe at the guidance of your attorney or other districts that are doing it, that's probably the ideal way to start that conversation in a more tangible manner.
Yeah, my own comment, and I think I shared this with you, Christine, that I'm not opposed to that potential. If in this scenario we are taking money though from the unassigned in order to buy the budget for the next fiscal year, I'd like to see go back to the general fund, but it doesn't mean that I would not consider the ERISA fund as well. And again, it can be 1% or 2%, whatever it is. I did ask Board of Selectmen to contact town attorneys to get some more definition on that.
And I can propose something, but the proposal is pretty straightforward. It's the excess funds account, and the state mandate is that it can be up to 2% of the budget. I don't know what more I can propose there. If you want it in writing, I guess. I'm not really clear.
It would have to be done. Yeah.
Does the creation of that account need to go to town meeting room?
That was going to be Christine, asked if that account would have to be approved by a town meeting. So that was something that was a question I brought to you, Mike, relative to taking it to the town attorney.
It's recommended by the selectmen and then taken to the Board of Finance.
So what the town attorney said was to have, because the Board of Ed is bringing the proposal forward, it would behoove the Board of Ed to put the proposal together. And if it's that simple, that's great, but not only that simple, but the mechanics of how it works and all that. And then we'd be able to act on something like that. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I speak?
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
So what you're asking us is to cut, according to Deb's calculation, everything altogether is $442,000 out of this budget.
That's if we trim the other 65,000, yes.
I have to tell you what, from where we were at the meeting and how we got to this now, this is really hugely disappointing. So when we hear about what the people can afford, let them decide themselves. Because I understand that we hear from things, but I hear from parents too about the great work we do, and they don't want to slow the momentum down. So that's where my audience is. And I understand where certain board members are, where their audience is, but that's where my audience is. And I'd hate to see the $442,000 would be 6 or 7 teachers, because we've already trimmed all the branches off the tree anyways over the last 4 and 5 years. And in years when we've done zeros, and there have been a lot of them, okay, when we're looking at projections, we don't bring that up, that we're able to do that. So again, I have to be honest with you, it's kind of depressing to me that we have to cut that much money out of the budget. And you guys are still going into the rainy day fund, which has nothing to do with us. Not a thing.
Yeah, but looking back here, the fact that there are one-time expenditures in your budget that aren't going to reoccur in subsequent years. So, I mean, that's been kind of a thread here that we have to consider, that why would we increase the school budget based on a one-year expenditure that then would be the base budget for the next year?
Right, Dan, I think, this is Paul, I think that logic is very, very sound. And again, that the appropriation tool that the Board of Education would have for those one-time funded things certainly would seem like the right path to take for the, $100,000 of computers or whatever the kit might be that they need to buy. I would not be, I'm actually getting more comfortable with your proposal based on what you're suggesting.
Yeah, again, I'm trying to just develop something here where we are in consideration of the circumstances of the day.
I agree, the world's changed.
The budget's being asked for. The other route is that we do come in with a mill rate increase, as I presented in the beginning, and it goes to a referendum if that's possible.
I think Dan Smith had something.
Yeah.
Dan, did you have stuff for? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty much against going into the rainy day fund, as much as we're saying there's a potential of $700,000. If we're gonna go to that extreme, I would be for one, just to put the best budget forward and send it to the voter and let them vote on it. Because when we make things too complicated and we have Board of Ed members or Board of Finance members, other people trying to figure it out, and they're not catching along, the average voter is going to have a hard time trying to figure it out themselves. I think we need to put the best foot forward, put it to the town vote, and let them decide on it. I would also be in favor of them having the Board of Ed also having that was it the RISE account? Yeah, it would make the best sense so they can make one-time purchases from money that they already have.
Again, this is Peter. Can I just say something?
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
So our overall increase this year was $674,000. You're asking us to cut $442,000 out of our budget. And the rainy day fund, what's the hit to that? And I'm trying to figure this all out, because you're only funding us roughly a $250,000. If you're taking 400 less than that, to be honest with you, you're only funding us a couple of $100,000 more over where we were last year. So I'm looking at this and saying, why is there any money coming out of the rainy day fund? It certainly has nothing to do with us, because our budget's only going up a couple of $100,000.
It's protecting the taxpayer, Peter.
Peter, this is Ann. 300, about 300,000 of the 442 we're asking you to cut is going to come back as appropriations. It's not being completely cut.
All right, I thank you. I needed some clarification on that. So you're
Okay.
saying that part of that, so the only difference is about $65,000.
It's more than that, but
We're only going to
But
get the
it's not
appropriation if
400
we return the money.
no, nobody said that.
That's not true. You know, whatever the give back is, whatever the tuitions are, you know, are destined for the general fund. But whatever that amount should be is not dictating what would be granted on an appropriation, no.
And that would be a taxpayer decision, yeah?
It would be, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where that decision would be made.
Yeah, the appropriation would be moved forward
Mute,
based on.
please mute your mics, please. Stop talking over each other. Mute your mics. Can't hear a thing.
All right. So I'd like to think we're making some headway, and all of a sudden it seems to swing the other way. I think that we come down to a point where we look to an appropriation out of the unassigned to help accommodate the budgets that are trimmed down, and keep the mill rate as it should be currently at 29, or we, you know, take it to some level where it will be a increase, a mill rate increase that then would go to the town for a vote. And then whatever that vote is, you know, we may have to come back to reconvene. My thought was thinking about all of what has been presented and where we are in time, and trying to show some consideration to the circumstances of our taxpayers.
So Dan, just one more comment of mine for the unassigned. So in a worst case scenario, where we had to remove those dollars to fund this year's budget, and then the voters approved the appropriation that the Board of Ed would ask for. On a percentage basis, what does that bring the unassigned down to? Are we still well above what the state suggests we should have in that fund?
Yeah, so if we were at a 3.2 million, it would bring us down to roughly a 2.8 million. And that percentage would be something like 13%.
So well above the 8, 9, 10% they suggest. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Or 8.5%. Mustafa? Go ahead, Mustafa.
Okay, hi. I mean, I'm glad that at least there's somebody there who kind of shares some of my ideas. Dan, I agree with you. I don't know why we always try to build a budget on what may taxpayer say before we giving them chance to vote. So our job is to come up with reasonable budget, put it out there, have taxpayer vote for it, vote on it. And then if it doesn't go through, then come back to us. Then we have another discussion with all the members involved on that budget, Board of Ed, selectmen, all the guys. So let's do it this way. Put the budget out there with the increase that we have, and then we listen to the taxpayer. That's number one. Number two, what we're telling to the Board of Ed is, okay, so we will not give you all the money, but we will give you an appropriation. That appropriation is coming from the budget. Now, if that doesn't work, of course, the Board of Ed will not get anything. So, and it's get more complicated. So we're talking about it now for almost 2 hours, trying to figure it out, let alone the taxpayer who are not involved in these things 100%. So keep it simple. Let's build up this budget. Of course, with the agreement of everybody, put it out there. And then if it doesn't go through, then we'll discuss what we need to do in next step. We do not need to rush things or try to think what the taxpayer would do. That's not our job. Our job just to set up the budget, not to set it up in a way to go through, to set it up in a reasonable way and have the taxpayer vote. I mean, that's what I think. We're just making it more complicated. Unassigned fund appropriation, 65%, I mean, 2.4%, 297, 65,000. It's just too much, too many numbers involved that will, would make it just hard for people to understand these things.
Gustav, don't you think that the people don't understand a 0% increase and Board of Ed is still going to get more than likely the tools they need between how we increase their budget and any appropriation? I think the proposal, I'm really liking what Dan's suggesting here, that we can have our cake and eat it too, and still keep our savings account well above what we need it to be. I think the proposal is sound. And we, as elected officials on this board, I think it is our job to bring a budget that will pass via referendum. And I think this one will.
So,
I think if we send a budget out there with a 4.9% increase, $750,000, whatever it is, that's a non-starter. Sorry, whoever that was, I cut off.
Both stations. As I said in the beginning, we don't know what the continuum is relative to this epidemic. We would like to move towards a referendum, but we have the authority not to take it to a referendum as well. And so that's why it kind of worked two ways here, looking at, I think, a mill rate increase that could be acceptable. But the other way to look at it is if we're not going to referendum, I think we have to do our job and be responsible, but they are going to be taxpayers and say, gee, if I didn't vote on it and you gave me a mill rate increase, what's that all about? Why weren't you considering the circumstances we're living in right now? So it's kind of blending in. Go ahead, Ann.
I'd like to propose that actually we put the debt redemption part, put that on as a mill rate increase, because we're going to have to deal with that every year. And
that's
then
an easy one. That's an easy one to explain.
Yes, and then the remainder take out of the rainy day fund.
Okay, so if that were the case, we're talking a 0.26 mil increase to accommodate just the debt redemption. And 139 would come out of what we're proposing pulling out of the unassigned. So again, I'm reminding you that the numbers we came to was 486,828. So nearly a mil. But I would like to see that pared down by another 100,000 to 386,000. So then if we're taking out the 139, we're looking to take out roughly a half a mil, 247,000 from the unassigned. So we're doing a little bit of a compromise, you know, very modest mill rate increase. And with consideration for the circumstances, taking from the unassigned. With the thought that two things happen. One, we use the appropriation pathway to help Board of Ed get other things that they need. And that through the School of Choice Initiative and givebacks, we build back the 247,000 taken from the unassigned. So what's the thought there? Mike Anderson?
And that was a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's what we're supposed to be doing every year is adding to the mill rate as we discussed from the beginning for that school project. I think it's too much to ask both the Board of Ed and the Board of Education to try to take this thing down another 100,000. I don't see it. I mean, and you know, they're already asking $376,000 from the Board of Ed, and then another 65. I mean, they're meeting tomorrow, and we can see what they say about what kind of one-time expenditures they actually have that earmarked for an appropriation. I'd rather see us use the rainy day fund to fully fund whatever they need, and let the mill rate be the mill rate that we take to the voters, versus taking this thing down to a 0.26. I don't think a 0.73 mill rate increase is that draconian to bring to the taxpayers. And I think it's much more possible for the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed to meet that ask without that additional decrease. So I'm nervous about doing a double dip on the undesignated, unassigned. So you know, I'd rather see it go to where it's needed to run our schools, because again, we're focused on building revenue, not trying to cut expenses here, you know, just for the sake of cutting. We gotta look to the future, like Mustafa said.
All right, so with what Mike is saying, if we took the 486, 828, and that's the combination of the 297, 894 for Board of Ed, 188, 934 from general government, the 0.73 still would have to be 385,000 or roughly 386,000, make it easy, which means we'd still be 100,000 short and would have to come out of the rainy day fund.
Dan,
Yes.
Are we prepared as a Board of Finance to be doing this also again, dipping into the rainy day fund also next year? Because that is a very, very real possibility.
Yeah, I think, you know, that assessment would have to happen when we get there. But to your point, I don't like to see a continuation of a drawdown of the unassigned fund. You know, if we were to call it a rainy day fund, now probably presents circumstances that really define it as a rainy day. Mm-hmm. I would like to think what we experienced 1 year from now is not going to be the same, that it will be better.
I know, I understand that, but you know, a couple of weeks ago, there was a good amount of people on the board that were talking about, you know, economic development wasn't going to happen in 1 year, and we would probably end up having to see the same economic development next year. I'm thinking that, you know, we're sitting here April 1st, next year, we're gonna be under the same issue. I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate and making sure everybody's understanding that, we make it right this year, but if we're in the same position next year, well, we're kicking the can down the road.
I think more people are gonna be speaking to like when it sounds like that. After this year.
Sorry, somebody speaking?
Yeah, Carolyn,
I just said, I think next year, you're gonna find more people speaking to towns like ours, to have open space and fresh air and not be kept in the cities. I think there's gonna be a new appreciation for the kind of lifestyle that we live, and also, the farmers. I think what's happening is that give the farmers what they long time, and I think that's going to, once we get through this, I think there's a lot of things that may be better for our town in the long run. Just looking forward into the future.
Carolyn, they have to have jobs, and they also have to be able to afford to live here.
Hey, I agree. That's my point. But if you did have some growth, then, with housing being built and people building or using services in town rather than having all of our dollars go outside of town, I think that benefits everyone in the long run. And I think that's where I think it's going to go. I think you're seeing it now right here in the village with the co-op and, selling our product to our townspeople in our town and whoever else might be driving through. I just think it's something to consider.
okay, so Board of Finance members, we've talked about a couple of scenarios here, options. What seems to be most plausible? We've been at a little over 2 hours. I would like to come to some level of, doesn't have to be total agreement, but some level of consensus as to where the cuts should be, what the increase is, how the increase is going to be accommodated, whether it's going to be a mill rate increase and go to referendum, or if it's going to be a blend of taking some from unassigned and a mill rate increase, so modest, or keeping it status quo at 29 and take what we need from unassigned. So we have, let's call it 3 options. A would be coming up with a mill rate increase, which we're projecting to be at 0.73. B would be a modest mill rate of 0.26. And C would be 0 mill rate. So just one by one. Which one would you go with? Mustafa, A, B, or C?
Dana, I agree with your last suggestions. Like, it has to be like a mixture between mill rate increase and some decrease on the both budget, Board of Ed and selectmen. And now what I'm not comfortable with is the unassigned fund. But I would go for the unassigned fund if that money will be as a loan, which means to pay back unassigned fund when we get some money back from either Board of Ed or Board of Selectmen. That's the only, this is what I would agree. But to keep it as a habit, that I don't agree with, because that assigned fund is for our debts, bridges, and if we have like how much, every year we have to pay debts. So if we have recession, we have a big problem, that money is for payment of those debts. Thank you.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, I would say that we're in a modest recession right now, but not knowing the continuum of this epidemic, you know, we could go into a recession that looked very much like 2008 and 9 and years subsequent to that. So your option B, Mike, you're sitting just below the stop loss, so Mike Anderson, option A, B, or C?
I am for the 0.73 mil, which would include the money for the school project. And using at least, this is only if, I'm kind of waiting to see what the Board of Ed does with coming up with whatever one year expenditures that they can put off out of the budget. But assuming that they could come up with the 376,000, you know, we'd have to take 100,000 out of the undesignated to bring it down to the 0.73 mils, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with doing a little bit more too to add to the Board of Ed budget should they not come up with the $376,000 in cuts.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Dan Smith, you're right next to Mike Anderson. I know you can't see yourself, but you're next, Mike. Dan, excuse me. A, B, or C?
You're muted still.
I would be in favor of the 0.73. But I give the warning that, you know, we do it this year. We cannot, if we're in the same predicament next year, we're going to be in really dire straits, because I don't think we're going to be able to hit the undesignated fund like we're hitting it this year, even with the paybacks.
Okay. Thank you. Paul? A, B, or C?
Dan, I'd look for C, asking for continued cuts for the Board of Ed, and then to hold the mill rate as it is now. Pull some money out to fund this year's expenditures, and then allow the Board of Ed to request the additional appropriation when the time comes. Again, it is raining, friends. We're gonna go into recession. I think, Dan, you know this better than anybody. It's going to happen. How deep it'll be is to be determined, but things will get much worse before they get better.
And Aiken?
I would go with option B.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Carolyn Howell?
I'm a middle of the road person as well. I think option B, I mean, we're still paying, our debt down, but we're also, I've been for using the rainy day fund once. I don't think we should make a habit of it. And I agree that if we can pay it back, then we should.
Okay. So the votes right now are option A, 2, option B, 3, option C is 1. In my own vote, I think that there has to be consideration to the taxpayer, so I think it would be option B. And I think we can explain the increase for debt management. So it doesn't mean this is hard and fast, but we now are calling on the Board of Ed to come in with what they think can happen. We are dictating, looking at a proposed of $297,894, which is a 2.1% increase.
I'll be honest with you, I've been listening for 2 hours and 15 minutes. What are you asking us to cut out of our budget again?
I am asked, and this is a repeat, maybe the third or fourth time, one-time expenditures And as I looked at it, my eye went to transportation, utilities, grounds relative to the rehab of the playground and equipment purchases, knowing that some of that could be brought forward on appropriation. But as I've also said, I would leave it to your discretion as to where it should be coming from.
Again, you keep saying, but I'm asking the dollar amount you're asking to cut out of our budget.
I'm telling you, we're giving you $297,894.
That's what you're giving us. And so we have to cut the rest from the 643.
From the 674.
Really?
But some of that is coming back through appropriations, Peter. If you hold for
How much of that? Because I can't see the numbers, to be honest with you. So I'm trying to follow along as this goes on. I'm not seeing numbers. So when you say some is coming back as an appropriation, how much of that is coming back as an appropriation?
Right, let me give you two that would make sense, at least from our seat, maybe not from your seat, but from our seat. The building and grounds line, 72,000, and equipment purchases at 142,000. If I put those two together, that's $214,000.
I guess what I'm looking is how many teachers do I have to lay off? That's what I guess I'm getting at. So, and again, I need a number on that so I can handle layoff notices. Or the board's going to direct me to do that.
What you're saying then, Peter, is you've got no room on that transportation contract of 119,000. You've got no room on the utility with an increase of 43,000. You've got no room on building and grounds at 72,000, nor special equipment at 142,000.
So what I'm saying to you is this: I have a little bit of room on my transportation, but that would kick off into next year and the following year and the year after that, because they're not going to give anything away to us. They're not going to say you can put it off and it's going to be, you can forget it, Peter.
Yeah, but if they're one budget items, Peter,
Right.
you'll get it to appropriation, and it should not be carried forward in the school budget for subsequent years.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Christine.
I know Christine wants to speak.
I just have one comment and then I'm going to check out and you guys can just give us the number and we'll take the number. Peter's right. We will be doing layoffs. Just a couple of things to reiterate. I know we presented this, but technology isn't a one-time purchase for us and we haven't been able to purchase it for several years. We were zeroed out in that line item last year. So the purchases that we have in there this year are monies that we would like to see in every year to keep our technology program solid. So certainly you're right. We can cut that again. But I don't know if we can. We're struggling there. But it will be teachers. It will be programs. So I would like you to just make sure you're not accounting for that extra money coming back in tuition dollars, because it won't be there. And I'm not trying to be threatening or anything like that. But we will take the numbers. We will certainly look at the things that are considered one time. Utilities, we might see some solar savings there. So that's the number I kind of go to. But I don't see utilities as a one-time expense as well. We have to turn the lights on every year. In transportation, we have a contract there. We will certainly talk to them, but it's tough times for them right now too. So I don't know how much wiggle room we're going to have there. But my ask, I guess, is because we do have to have the slips out by May 1st, is that we get kind of an idea of this is the number. We're not going any further. We're not going to ask our taxpayer for any more. This is the number. And then we can do what we have to do to move forward. So I guess my ask would be if we could get something in writing on what kind of the plan is that you guys are putting forward and the number so that we can take it to the board tomorrow night and then we can start making those programming cuts as we need to. I'd appreciate it. I appreciate all your time tonight and all your discussion.
Thank you, Christine.
Why can't they're talking about running this to the voters, but yet they're just right now saying that that wouldn't go to voters, so they're kind of contradicting. Am I mistaken?
I don't know.
No, because, no, if you brought the whole package to the voters, you're bringing it to the voters. If you're only bringing back this amount of money, the 214,000 that you're suggesting that are one-time expenses, what's the difference if you bring it all as one budget, or if you have them come back at a later time and ask the taxpayers? You're still asking the taxpayers for that money. You're not telling them to cut and lay off teachers. So I think that's kind of.
Because if we don't get the appropriation, then we're in a situation where it's too late to lay off teachers. So we need to do that now. That's kind of where we're at.
I think that's, you know, I don't agree with that. And I think that's a misleading statement.
Yeah, and my own view, Christine, is that as I looked at this, it would be in the probabilities, as you say, staffing, that, you know, and again, I just came to these numbers because they are numbers that jump out. And, you know, whether or not there's room in those four line items I've brought forward, that's for you to tell me. But that's what I'm saying. And, you know, I'd like to see that there's probably some room on those 4 line items and quickly jumping to giving pink slips.
Well, I again, Christine, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
So Christine's right. We have it's April 1st now. I'm not sure what the statute's going to be for layoffs, but we have to react to that quickly because we can't guarantee that we're going to save anywhere else in the budget. So we're going to have to give out layoff notices. Listen, I've heard everybody talk about how many years that they've been doing this. Well, this is 45 for me and 25 years in the highest levels of administration. So I've been doing this a long time, and I'm not taking any chances that we're going to put the Board of Ed in jeopardy because they won't be able to pay their bills, especially at the end of the year. So we're going to have to protect by laying off teachers.
When can you come back to us relative to the number I gave you and tell us hard and
Well, I'm going to
fast?
tell you right now, I might be able to save $30,000 on transportation. That's about it. I mean, right now, as it stands, our vendor called us up a couple of weeks ago and said they could go bankrupt because of this. Now, obviously, there's stimulus money that's coming out now from the president having to do with school transportation, but they're just like everybody else right now. So, I mean, I might be able to put off, let me say that again, $34,000 into the subsequent years, the years 3, 4, and 5 of my contract. That I would have to spread that over.
Okay.
That's
so
it.
why, Peter, let's go to the next one. Why couldn't you come to the Board of Finance with an appropriation for what you put in for building and grounds?
Well, I could, but let me ask you this question. If it's over $20,000, then we have to go to a referendum.
That's right.
Well, I'm rolling the dice here. We're all rolling the dice if we have to go to a referendum.
You're rolling the dice the other way too. If we go in with a large mill rate increase and the referendum's turned down.
But here's, I guess, what I'm saying. If I'm going later on for an additional appropriation for these items and I don't get it, that's why I have to lay off teachers. I can't do it after May 1st. Can't do it.
I understand that. But also with special equipment. I mean, I think those are 2 items that easily could be brought forward for an appropriation. You know, and speaking out loud here, not in conference with other colleagues, but they're hearing me. I don't see that would be a problem. And that it would then go to Board of Selectmen to call a town meeting for a vote. I don't see that to be a problem.
There's just too much money for us to cut out of this budget. Too much.
Again, the majority in those 2 that I've just said are one-times. I know Christine would like to keep it going from year to year. Re-enter in the budget in the following year. We're trying to get to something that's in consideration of the circumstances we're in, Peter.
But again, the bottom line is I'm still gonna have to cut substantial money out of my budget. Again, it'd be nice if we were at the meeting and we had this up on the wall and we were looking at all the numbers. I mean, it's your decision. You can do whatever you want, that you're the board. But I'm looking at this and trying to make heads or tails out of this, and I'm not seeing very, I can't roll the dice because May 1st is the deadline. And that's when, again, we've been cutting every single year for the last 8 years that I've been here. And we are at the point now where the only place we could go is certified and non-certified staff. And certified staff is the May 1st deadline.
Well, yeah, I could do a polling of my Board of Finance members relative to the potential of those appropriations, but they still would have to go to a town meeting.
And I'm rolling the dice on that. You are, or I am, whoever.
Yes, Christine.
I want to be clear. We don't want it to sound like a threat or something. It's just that's the deadline we're up against. We've done it in years past. And then because we've been able to put forward a budget to vote to the voters, and the voters voted it in, then we are able to go back and bring those teachers, and say, guess what? You actually get to stay. With going forward with this, we know we're not having the opportunity to get that voter input at this point. Now, if we get I don't know when that appropriation vote is going to happen. I mean, are we talking August, September? Then what we would do is we would just have to go back and maybe try to rehire. Well, we would try to rehire or hire new teachers. It's just, the reality is in this business, the May 1st is the cutoff. So that's what we're dealing with. It's not a threat or saying, I mean, certainly, Dan, we're going to look at all of these numbers and all of these line items and, see what it is. I don't know that it's going to be to the extent that we're looking at there. We'll get back to, we're meeting tomorrow night and we're meeting again. Our regular meeting is next Wednesday. We'll hopefully get back to you by next Wednesday on what that number looks like. But it isn't, I just don't want it to sound like a threat. It's just, it is going to be the reality of a combination of those things. And if we can, through appropriation down the road, we get to get some teachers back, that's great. We won't get to get the ones back that we have now, but I just want it to be understood as the reality. It's not a threat. It's not trying to be rude. It's not trying to, play nasty or anything, but you're asking where we're at. And for right now, as an overview, we've known all along, if we have to take this significant of a cut, that's what would happen. So we're just going to prepare for that tomorrow night, and then we'll let you know how that number looks, if that's okay.
Right. Mark Anderson.
I just wanted to say that as far as I'm concerned, Christine, Dan has looked at some items in your budget that are one-time only budget items that could potentially be done later. My whole philosophy is that, if you're telling me that I don't want any cuts to staffing. I do not want to jeopardize, or programs. I do not want to jeopardize the school of choice opportunity that we have. My vote is specifically tied to the fact that, any cuts that you guys are going to be able to find tomorrow in your meeting are not related to staff cuts and not related to programs. And if we need to increase the amount that we're taking out of the undesignated fund to bring this mill rate increase down to a palatable number, that's how we do it. And that's why I thought that, the members on the board that thought that 0.73 number, which I'll point out that Sean Murphy earlier in his proposal was at the 0.7 number. I think that's a palatable number for the town. And if there is no way for the Board of Education to bring down their number, $376,000, then we can use the undesignated fund to bring it down to that 0.73 and really bring that to the people, and I think that's fair. But I will not support any cuts to staffing or programs that would jeopardize the school choice. Thanks.
And Deb has something that she'd like to add.
Go ahead, Deb Martin.
On the 17,000 that you're referring to for the grounds, the building and grounds, that's actual maintenance. So that's like the painting of the fields, mulch for the buildings and that kind of thing. So I'm not sure, it's not really a one-time purchase. It was an increase to it of 3,100, but those are things that we do purchase year over year. Just wanted to put that there too, so that we have an understanding. It's not a one.
Deb, I have no problem with that. You know, I know that the majority of the number was to rehabilitate the playground because it's in terrible shape and was not part of the school modernization program. And that could easily be appropriated. I don't see any challenge to that whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, quick, I just want to say that I second what just Mike said about cutting stuff and programs related to our kids. Thank you.
And I feel the same way, Christine. So I mean, that's why I came up with these 4 line items. You know, is there room in those line items with the thought that we don't compromise staffing? I said that in the very beginning of the presentation. So anybody want to add to where we are now? I think we've put it to Board of Ed to do another crunch and tell us what happens. And I think there is a consensus that we don't want to compromise on staff. And it's so for you to tell us. And I know the number you presented, you said, gee, this is where we're at. But we're at a point where we don't think it's palatable to bring that to a referendum. It's going to be turned back. So we're trying to blend it to make something happen to the benefit of all. Dan Smith, you had your hand up.
Hey, Dan, I think when we leave out of this meeting, would it be possible to either put it to a motion or to get a white paper with all these options so everybody is understanding of what is being asked?
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion at this point. You know, I think this with the polling, it kind of gives me a sense where the sentiment is. But we've asked a lot of the Board of Ed, and you know, unless we're just totally dictating that this is the number, okay, then we can move forward. But I think what we're hearing, Christine is saying, I'd like to take this to my board tomorrow and have that discussion and bring it back.
So can we have what you decided in writing?
So
what's that?
Go ahead,
We
Peter.
have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Peter, go ahead and I'll finish up.
Well, I like, Dan, exactly what you said, to have in writing tomorrow morning so that we can look at it. We're meeting with the board tomorrow night, but I need it in writing so that I will be able to absolutely figure out where we're going to make the cuts from. I just want to say one thing. I'm not threatening either with this, but I've been living with this budget for so long that I know there's no other place to go. So, and again, I deal with the fact that the statute says that May 1st is the deadline on this, and there are I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed, and so how you message, how you follow the statutes in terms of giving the teachers a hearing and so forth and so on. So we got a lot of work to do if we're going to get that down that far. So again, not my first time doing this, unfortunately, but I'd like to see everything that you just put together tonight in terms of what's the bottom line, what's the breakdown, and what you're planning, okay? That's all I want.
Peter. All right. Kind of in conclusion, I mean, we've talked a lot tonight. I'd like to think we made some headway. I mean, I don't want to feel that this has been all for naught. I think we're in a situation where regardless of what the timeline is, we still have a responsibility to take into consideration the status of the environment right now where we are fiscally, what we'd like to develop in terms of outcomes, and bring forward an appropriate budget. So, any last comments from?
Yeah, please, Dan, this is Paul. So I do think that we need to have some very good clarity to the Board of Ed, because we did ask early on in this process for them to go back and make some cuts, and that they came back with the same budget. So I think it has to be clear that there is going to be pain, and there's got to be cuts, and we have to keep this tax rate low for the taxpayer. So I agree with Peter and Christine. They need a number, and I think it's going to be in that hundreds of thousands of dollars that's going to be required to keep this tax rate where we want it, where it needs to be for the hurting taxpayers in North Stonington. So I know there's going to be a pain. I've been on the receiving end of that pain a couple of times in my 35-year career. So I get it, guys. It's not going to be easy, and some folks are going to be hurt, I'm sure. And we just don't want it to be the taxpayers anymore, the residents of the town.
And I don't want to hurt the students of the town either. I don't want to hurt the students of the town, and I don't want to hurt the parents of the town either.
Yep, they're taxpayers as well.
All right, anybody else? All right, on the agenda, I did forward to you the profit loss for general government, for Board of Ed, and the taxpayers report. And if you hadn't looked at it, the taxpayer through the end of February is at 94.6. So, we still have some work there to have happen. So, in terms of minutes, we will table minutes to the next time we meet, if that's okay. So, I would make a motion to adjourn.
No, we have to have the opportunity.
Pardon me? What's that?
We have to have the opportunity to comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Being in this environment.
Virtual world, public comment.
I apologize. So if there should be participating public members, if you have a question, you're welcome to join us.
So if you're on the phone and you're unmuting yourself, it's *6. If you're on your computer, you can hit the space bar to unmute yourself. So I don't know if there's anyone that does have public comment.
Sean Murphy.
Go ahead.
First a comment and then a question. The first comment I have is the governor did extend the July 1st deadline for municipalities to have their budgets approved by. And I would hope that both the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen keep that in mind. And I didn't hear everything at the beginning of the meeting. Mike Urgo said something about what we were exempt from under the executive order from the governor. If that could be further expanded upon or repeated, please.
I don't know what you're referring to.
The governor, in terms of his executive order on public meetings, town meetings, and referendums.
Who could approve the budget? Who could approve the budget? And first of all,
I don't really have any more comment on that tonight, Sean. I think the only thing we talked about was the hope was that the situation will get better and that we hope to be able to follow the normal process of going through we will follow the normal process of a public hearing.
I heard that, Mike, but you made mention of what we were exempt, the executive order from the governor, what we are exempt from in the budget process. And I would like you to repeat that, what was said earlier.
I don't know what it was I said earlier. I apologize if I'm not.
Well,
recalling.
let me ask a series of questions then. is the Board of Finance required to recommend a budget to the Board of Selectmen?
So Sean, here's what I'm gonna do. The governor is supposed to come out with even more guidance on this, I think either tomorrow or the next day. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm not gonna have answers to the questions you ask right now because I think it's actually might even change more.
Have you obtained a town attorney opinion on the governor's executive order?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into talking about legal stuff right now in this meeting. It's not on the agenda, and I'm not prepared to answer all these questions. So
I think not answering it is being deceitful, and I'll leave it at that.
that's fine. It's not being deceitful, but thank you for your comment.
Sean, what I would say is I think that the condition of the state, as you probably know, has continued to deteriorate and has become a very fluid situation. I think the governor is trying to give consideration to the municipalities in developing budgets and whether or not there's options in there in terms of exemptions. You know, it's possible that we're not able to hold a public meeting, you know, because of the epidemic. And I think that's what the governor is contemplating, and I'm sure that will be passed down to the municipalities.
I would be concerned that the Board of Finance would be left out of a Board of Selectmen decision on the budget. That the Board of Finance should still have to recommend it. The Board of Finance should still have to recommend it to the Board of Selectmen.
I think that's how we understand it. You know, I don't see any diversion from that whatsoever, Sean.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anyone else with public comment?
Yeah, I have a comment if I could. I guess because I just want to make it clear. I am on probably at least eight conference calls a day, and probably more than half of those are between public health, Region 4, emergency management with the governor. So many discussions about all of the things that have to do with the COVID-19 situation. And we're very sensitive to the fact that this is catastrophic, but also it means a lot of different things in a lot of different areas of municipalities. And it means a lot of different things to different municipalities. We're non-chartered, we're governed by state statute. So, you know, things are continuously moving. I think the governor's come out with 12 executive orders, and it seems like every week, you know, even every other day, sometimes there's new things happening, but the communication has been very good from the state. And our intention, as I've said from the very beginning, and I know everyone on this call feels the same way, that we want this to be as normal a budget process as possible. I don't have any interest in approving this budget without the public's. Certainly, their input will definitely be there. If it comes down to that, we have to approve it through the mechanism of, you know, Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, and so be it. But I mean, we will do our absolute best to make this as normal as possible. And I can tell you, just from the town's perspective, we are engaged in every facet of this.
Any other public questions or comments?
Hello.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, I didn't know if you were going to be able to hear me. One thing I haven't heard about, I believe we're supposed to have a revaluation this year. And as long as I've been alive, revaluation always meant my taxes are going to go up, which is good for the town, I guess, but it isn't good for me as a taxpayer who's already strapped. So I'm hoping that both the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, all three of you can, I know we all got our pet projects and we all got our certain things that we want to happen, but you know, this is the year is pretty tough. I imagine back in 1920 29, when the stock market crashed, those people didn't want to go on rationing and then all that stuff either. And this might be the year we have to do those things. So, and I hear you all saying, you know, you don't want to lose anything out of the school. I don't either. But times are hard, and I hope you can realize that, because it isn't going to get much better. Not right away. So that's just my comment on that. I'm really worried about the revaluation and more money coming out of my pocket that I don't have a say in. And that's it. Thank you.
Brian, relative to the reval, we have had discussions. I mean, we are scheduled for a mandated reval this year. But that usually means inspection of properties both inside and out. But under the current situation, seems unlikely that be inspecting interiors of homes. So, I mean, the whole question is, okay, is this reval going to really serve us at this time? Is it something that could be deferred? And we're in discussion on all that, and we don't know where it's going to go. Anything else? Board of Finance members in particular? Any more public comments? I think that was the last one.
I think it was the last one.
Okay. With that, I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who was that? Dan?
Yep.
All right, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We've got everybody here. We appreciate that. And we'll call it an evening at 9:45. So most likely we will reconvene probably next Wednesday. I'd have to look at the schedule, maybe a special meeting. But first I've got to check with Christine to see what comes out, if that gives her enough time to come back to us. So, and hopefully we'll know after tomorrow evening. Maybe tomorrow evening. Great, folks. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks,
Night.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Night, John Boy.
Good night, Mary Ellen.
Oh, that's good stuff.